The Demons of Chaos each got their own unique detachment from the Grotmus reveals, with all of the main gods Slanesh, Nurgle, Tzeentch and Khorne getting a slice of the pie. And in this video we are looking at the Blood God detachment, which is, as you might be able to guess, the Khorne related one. This detachment has got quite big boots to fill because with a pure melee army like Khorne, the demonic incursion rule, which can let you deep strike in 6 inches away from the enemy, is incredibly hard to beat. But the new detachment has its own set of 2 unique rules, which at the very least give it a very good try. So the first part of the Blood Legion detachment rule is Murder Call, which is hilariously thematic and fun and arguably quite strong too. It lets you, whenever an enemy ends a normal or advanced move within 6 inches of one of your demon units, immediately make a surge move towards them. And this means you can roll a d6 and you move that many inches towards the enemy, and crucially, you can use this to move into engagement range. Now you can't do this if you are already in engagement range, but this can be super strong. If an enemy moves up, 3 or 4 inches away to make it so that they're getting an easier charge, you can potentially beat them to the punch and move into combat with them before they can charge you. Of course, you don't get any charge bonuses when you do this, but you also deny them any charge bonuses because of course they can't charge, and as it's your opponent's turn, you will get to select a unit to activate first in the combat phase, so barring any other strike first tricks they may have on a unit, you can absolutely use this to blunt an enemy charge and do a load of damage into them before they can swing. So it is honestly such a good rule on anything from Bloodletters to a Bloodthirster, just rushing forward into combat and catching your opponent off guard before they can react. It is only a d6 move, so it isn't reliable by any stretch. If the enemy is clever, they can very easily set up either just over 6 inches away so you can't even do this, or even just set themselves up maybe 4 or 5 inches away so that it's not the most difficult charge for them, but it is quite a hard roll for you to make because you're only rolling 1d6, remember? So the enemy can really play around this. Like in most games where you didn't have this detachment, yes, your opponent may want to get 2 or 3 inches away just to get that almost guaranteed charge, but in this detachment, if you are running this and your opponent knows what your rules are, they're just never going to do that because they are going to know that surge move will be coming, so they will just always set themselves up 4 or 5 or 6 or just over 6 inches away and make their charge potentially a bit harder, but essentially completely denying you your detachment rule, which in the grand scheme of things is probably a better trade-off for them. So it does have a big downside that it is quite easy to counter. It also has another big downside in that if you are running this, you are not running the Demonic Incursion detachment, which as I mentioned earlier, gets you that incredibly strong potential 6-inch charge out of Deepstrike. So it does have some very serious limitations, this detachment, but I do think it can be really fun, and if you do manage to get the ability off into the enemy, it can be a massive game changer in terms of the outcome of a particular combat. The detachment also brings with it a nice little sticky objective style rule with Blood Tainted. This procs when a unit of yours destroys an enemy unit that was within range of an objective marker at the start of a phase, and if your unit had a higher OC value than the enemy, then that objective becomes yours and gets stickied for you until the enemy has a unit on it that has a higher level of control. So essentially, you kill a unit on an objective, and if you had a higher OC, it gets stickied for you. So it is a small hoop to jump through, but it is quite a nice way to get some more objectives under your control and held on for you as your murderous host of demons wanders off to go and kill everything else on the battlefield. So it is quite a nice little quality of life rule that the detachment also brings. So whilst I don't think overall it is universally as good as the Demonic Incursion, just in terms of the pure detachment rule, where this detachment could be worth considering is in the fact that you also get a whole slew of new enhancements and stratagems, which are actually really quite good. The 4 enhancements you get are a huge improvement straight off on the 1 that you get from the original index, and they do start strong with the 35-point Slaughterthirst aura. This gives the bearer a 6-inch aura in which all of your friendly Khorne units, excluding monsters, get the Lance rule on their weapons, so turning your Bloodletters and your Blood Crushers into truly terrifying units, and something like 10 Bloodletters will be charging in with 20 Strength 5, -2 AP, 2 damage swings with +1 to wound, and rerolling wound rolls of 1. So practically every single wound is going to be getting through on something like a toughness 4 Marine. It is genuinely a super scary combo, and it being an aura, this can easily affect a good 2 or 3 units around the bearer, so it is just a solid force multiplier, and it is definitely worth taking, I think, on something like a Rendmaster on a Blood Throne, or even a Bloodthirster, thanks to their big base sizes. Although it won't impact the Thirster directly because it is a monster, they can still absolutely spread that buff around and get a load of units near them to be wounding that much more easily. Fury's Cage is to me a little pricey maybe at 20 points. It is good, it gives you full rerolls to hit and to wound, but you do have to suffer D3 + 1 mortal wounds when you choose to activate it, so it is a massive buff, but it's also potentially 4 mortal wounds on the bearer. Now, this is monster only, so it can only go on either your Bloodthirsters or your Demon Princes, so 4 mortal wounds on them isn't exactly the end of the world, but I think personally, because it's got that downside, maybe 15 points would have been a better fit. But either way, it is a very good enhancement. It can work wonders on your Demon Princes, especially your Demon Princes with wings, because they can get up to 9 strength 10 attacks that hit on 2s, and will wound Terminators on 2s with 2 rend and 3 damage. So with those full rerolls, that will get a hell of a lot of mileage, netting you around 4 dead Terminators or Custodian Guard in one blow all by himself, and that is not even counting the lethal or sustained hits that they can put on themselves with Harbinger of Death, so it can make a Demon Prince super killy or a Bloodthirster super killy, and it still keeps them at a not unreasonable price cost, because it is, even at 20 points, although I think it's a tiny bit pricey, that isn't a huge addition to either of their point values for that amount of damage output that it can add to them. Brazen Maw is also reasonably cheap at 15 points. This one gives you +2 to the charge rolls for the bearer and his unit. Obviously, on something like a Skullmaster with some Blood Crushes, this is going to be amazing, giving them a really scary threat range. But even on something like a Bloodthirster, that could be netting you a 12-inch move, a 2d6 + 2-inch charge, not to mention a possible advance in charge if you choose to use one of the stratagems that we will see in just a minute. So it's really good, really reliable, and it is just one that I think we're going to see in pretty much every army, because advance and charge on a melee army like Khorne is super great. For 15 points, it is just, in my opinion, an auto take every single time. The final enhancement is Gateway unto Damnation. This one is cute and it's cheap at 10 points, but it's kind of one of those that I think is more fun than truly competitive. It lets your Deadly Demise go off on a 2+, so now when your Bloodthirster dies, it will be doing d6 mortal wounds on a 2+ rather than a 6. And it does also get a bit of a buff in that if your unit has destroyed an enemy unit in the game, the Deadly Demise becomes d3 + 3 mortal wounds. So again, it's cute and it could be funny, but this will probably be one of the enhancements that I imagine we will see picked least out of the 4. Unless you've got a spare 10 points and you haven't used all the 3 others, I think you're probably just going to go for the other 3 rather than this one. Now, however, we get onto the enhancements, and like other detachments, we have got 6 really quite solid ones. They are all 1 command point aside from one of them, which is 2, and as I said, they are just generally all quite strong and fun. Wrath Undeniable is in the fight phase. After an enemy has selected targets, you pick a Khorne unit that was the target, and then whenever a model in that unit is destroyed, you can roll a d6, and on a 4+, they can fight before that model is removed. So it's really handy on a unit of bloodletters that's just been charged or something like that. But equally, if you wanted to risk it on a 50-50 dice roll, this could be very scary on something like a Bloodthirster for just that one final outrageous burst of rage. And if you really needed to kill the unit that they were in combat with, or the character that Bloodthirster was in combat with, that could be a very good way to just 50-50 chance doing it. So it is just an always useful, cheap, and great stratagem to have on your units. Blood Begets Skulls is also one command point and is in your charge phase. It's very straightforward, it's very simple. Advance and charge. For Khorne, that is brilliant. On Bloodletters, Blood Crushers, Bloodthirsters, this will always have a huge amount of value in a Khorne army, and it also ties in super well with the Brazen Maw enhancement, so it is just all around a fantastic stratagem. You will probably be using this almost every single turn in the game, just to have that one unit that really wants to make a charge in get it much more reliably. Gore Hungry Onslaught is the same as we've seen in a few other detachments in Grotmus. Is the ignore terrain when you move or charge stratagem, so you use this in either of the relevant phases, and now you can just yeet a unit of Blood Crushers through some terrain and into an enemy. Super powerful, incredibly handy on a melee army, on a glass cannon melee army like Khorne, in such a terrain heavy edition that we do have in 10th edition. Our 2 command point stratagem is Fool's Flight. This is done in your opponent's movement phase. Just after a unit has fallen back from one of your units, you can pick a Khorne unit that is within 6 inches of that enemy, and that would be eligible to charge, and they can just charge. So if your opponent thought that they would fall back to maybe get onto an objective or leave your unit out in the open to get shot, no chance. You can just rush straight back into them. Of course, you don't get any charge bonus when you do this, it does clarify that, but still, this is amazingly good at locking down a fleeing unit, or keeping your unit safe in combat from enemy shooting, or just getting that extra bit of movement around the board. It is expensive at 2 CP, but potentially game changing, so a really strong, useful strat to have in your back pocket for when the enemy does try to leave you high and dry in the middle of the board. We also get a fairly nice shooting phase stratagem in Skulls Beget Blood. This enables you to pick an infantry or mounted unit that is not within engagement range of an enemy unit, and you can pick an enemy unit that is within 8 inches of your unit, and you roll at 6d6, and on each 4+, that enemy unit takes a mortal wound. So essentially they are just getting some flaming skulls thrown at them. It averages about 3 mortal wounds, which isn't amazing, but equally that could kill a Terminator before you go to charge in, or if you've got an enemy transport that has 2 or 3 wounds left, you could potentially use this to pop that enemy transport so you can then charge the squishy unit inside. So it does have a lot of potential and a lot of use, and just having that tiny bit of ranged output can be a really handy backup plan or thing to have in your back pocket for a melee heavy army like Khorne. Finally, we also get Sheathed in Brass, which is exactly what the Blood God ordered. Khorne is, as I mentioned, very much a glass cannon army, but this, for 1 command point, lets you, in the enemy shooting phase, pick a unit that has been targeted by the enemy, and they get a 3-up armor save for that phase. So your Bloodletters are now going to be much more durable against all of that 0 and -1 AP high rate of fire guns that do typically just mow them down. So it is incredibly handy for Khorne, and will at the very least mean some of your Bloodletters will get up the board and get into combat more intact, which is one of the biggest issues that Khorne has always faced in 40k. So I think overall it is a fluffy, thematic, super fun detachment that can make your Khorne army much faster, a bit more durable thanks to the 3-up armor save and the ability to hide behind terrain a bit more easily but still get your charges off. It just allows you to potentially out-tech the opponent a little bit more, and especially by denying them some of their charges by, in some instances, getting into combat with them before they can make the charge. So it does have some good uses. I don't think it's quite as good as the Demonic Incursion, just in terms of that detachment rule, but I do think the enhancements are great, and the strats really do help with how this kind of army in this detachment wants to play. And I mean, the detachment rule itself, whilst as I said, I don't think it's as good as Demonic Incursion, it's good enough that I think it will at least make some difference in most games. So it's well worth a shot, this detachment, trying out a pure, full-fledged Khorne list that just dares the opponent to get close to them and then rushes into combat before they can charge, I think is going to be a whole lot of fun. But as always, what do you make of the Blood Legion detachment, and will you be giving it a try? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.